Hello, it is nice to see you again here. In this module, we focus on how to score performance-based assessment questions. Our main discussion will be on the types of instruments for recording student performances, the different types of rating scales, and the features of good scoring instruments. Firstly, there are a number of ways teachers can use to record student performances or to collect information of student learning. Anecdotal records, behavioral tallies, checklists, and rating scales. Firstly, let's talk about anecdotal records. The name sounds strange, right? But this is a very familiar tool which teachers can use to write down the description of performance in front of them or just after observing the students. It's very useful for keeping a record of performances during the teaching process for formative assessment. The disadvantage is that you can only record one student at a time. The amount of evidence may also be limited. An example of anecdotal records can be seen here. Jason is the student. This is a record of several performances Jason made on several days in the skill of reading. The teachers can describe anything he or she considers important in Jason's performance, especially those regarding the targeted objectives of reading, and perhaps other factors which may affect his performance, such as his health or attitudes on the specific day. The second tool is behavioral tallies. These are lists which write down students' frequencies of performing some specific behavior. For instance, in a lesson focusing on fluency, you may want to record how many times students have used and or fillers such as you know in the middle of the sentences. Or the teachers may notice a student's tendency to make some pronunciation mistakes, such as the ch sounds or the th sounds in English, and want to count the number of times the student makes this type of mistakes. This tool is very useful for keeping track of a clear list of behavior that the teacher knows for sure will happen. But the tally does not always include many behaviors, as teachers cannot have enough memory and attention to count. This is one example for a behavioral tally sheet in the skill of writing. The four behaviors the teacher wants to observe are the use of less common academic vocabulary, the use of complex sentences or structures, the use of lexical cohesive devices, and the use of collocations. The teachers can study students' writing and record the number of times students perform these actions so that they can closely check student progress over time. The next instrument for recording student performance is very familiar. It is named a checklist. This means teachers create a list of specific steps of a procedure or a list of behaviors, characteristics, or activities. The teachers or students can use the checklist by checking or ticking at the behavior which occurs. The list may contain more items than the behavioral tallies we have mentioned earlier. Checklists are very useful if the behaviors are in a sequence or if all the items make up a complete performance. However, the teachers or students only decide on a yes-no basis, which is sometimes very challenging and cannot provide detailed description of student ability. This is one example of a checklist for students who aim to reach Band 7 in IELTS writing. The major category named Task Response has been broken down into a number of standards, which means the criteria accompanied by performance levels. The standards are: 1. The essays and all the paragraphs are complete in their structures. 2. All the questions in the prompt have been answered. see how many questions they have and whether you have answered them properly by providing an accurate and exact type of response. 3. Claims are highlighted and form an overview. 4. Claims are extended and justified. 5. Avoid overgeneralization or faulty logic. Both teachers and students can use the checklist by ticking a yes or no as suitable to students' writing. The checklist can also be used as a specification or the objectives students need to meet. The last instrument we introduce is rating scales, which is the most familiar type of instrument for scoring performance assessment, not just to record student performance as the previous type. Rating scale contains standards or criteria for evaluating a performance. Each criterion has a number of performance levels, and teachers or students can tick at the level which matches the student performance in that criterion. Rating scales are useful because they provide more information than other instruments. Teachers and students know the student's level in each criterion, very specific and detailed. The downside is the challenges when constructing rating scales. There are two types of rating scales, the analytical ones and the holistic scale. Firstly, analytical scales are those containing clearly defined criteria or key points or straight, and each criterion is clarified by a number of levels representing students' levels of performance. Three types of analytical scales are, firstly, the Likert scales, which have numerical levels, possibly 4 levels named 1, 2, 3, and 4. Secondly, the semantic differential scale with the use of words to clarify the difference between student performances, such as poor, average, good, excellent. The third type of analytical scale is partial credit analytical scale, the most informative one, which describes student performance level from the most wrong to the rightest one, giving a part of the full score to the incomplete but not wrong performance. The second type of scale is named holistic scale, which requires teachers to make a judgment on the overall quality of students' work. The scale contains a number of band scores, such as from 1 to 9. Then, in each band score are a number of descriptive sentences of student performances. The analytical instruments are advantageous as they can give feedback on the students' strengths and weaknesses, monitor teaching and reteaching if necessary. This means teachers will know the areas they should focus on teaching the student. The disadvantages of analytical scales include its time consumption to use and the difficulties to create and write the correct description for all the criteria. It takes teachers quite a lot of time to get familiar with the scales when they first use it. Moreover, the criteria and performance levels both need great effort to define clearly. Because of its high level of specificity, analytical scales are highly useful for classroom assessment, where teachers need to provide feedback to students and students need to have a clear orientation for further study. Partial credit scales, as you can see, one example here, should be used because in performance-based assessment, students' responses vary in the degree of correctiveness. So they should be awarded with some score ranging from full point credit to partial point credit and 0 point credit. The use of partial credit scales is also good for reliability because it increases the accuracy of scoring. For classroom assessment, teachers can follow some advice below in developing an analytical scale. First, they need to identify the criteria. Then, they can mark a few papers to recognize typical students' errors and misconceptions. Next, please rank the errors and misconceptions on the degree of correctiveness and use them as a basis to write the levels in the criteria. Then, teachers can use the rubrics to mark all the papers. In contrast to analytical scale, holistic scales take less time to use. They also help teachers to see the students' work as a complete product. Usually, the teachers may look at the students' work and decide the suitable scores based on the student's success with at least a majority of the descriptive sentences in the band score. The process may be very fast for experienced raters who know the description of the band score well. The disadvantages with holistic scales are the fact that a single overall mark may not point out the necessary details of students' strengths and weaknesses. Moreover, the teachers may be biased in scoring because they may pay attention to one criterion more than another, or they may use some criteria not in the scale, such as neatness or presentation style. These errors may never be found out because the teacher's score may still be exact. But the students have to suffer because they actually do not know what their score may mean. For this reason, holistic scales are less useful for classroom assessment than analytical scales. If they are used, teachers should give not only a score, but should also include some comments. Now let's turn to the last important content of these modules, in which we will discuss some points which will help you identify a less useful scale from a more useful one, and then avoid the mistakes in writing a scale. Most serious are the problems with the indicators, or the criteria, and the descriptive levels. They may be irrelevant to the course objectives and the assessment targets. There may be too many criteria or band scores, leading to lengthy scales which are not user-friendly. Some of the performance levels are even too challenging or immeasurable because the student performances are not yet clarified. For example, one performance level for writing topic sentences is: topic sentences are attracting attention. This is very hard to measure because attractiveness of something may vary from one person to another. Another problem is when the criteria are too specific and may be applicable to only one task or one type of task and not for general use. The performance levels may be too general with some ambiguous adjectives such as good, bad, average. One example of an ambiguous adjective to describe student pronunciation is students pronounce unintelligibly. It is not clear what intelligibly means. Another common ambiguous adjective is the requirement for students to reach native speaker standards, while the standards of native speakers are not defined. Otherwise, the description of the performance levels may be untypical for the students because they have been borrowed from another scale somewhere else. Scale designers may also make the mistake of using technical terms such as syntax or social-linguistic functions in the scale, making the scale hard and threatening for students and even teachers to use easily. For classroom assessment, scales should be simple so they can be used by students as well. This is not to mention the error of having two criteria in one, such as student use of a wide range of vocabulary and sentences, or student use of cohesive and coherence devices. It is impossible for raters to make a judgment in this scale. Many scales also make it harder for teachers to use because they focus more on what students cannot do rather than what they can do. Such scales may make teachers focus on the mistakes rather than the competence of the student, which may not motivate students enough for the purpose of classroom assessment. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you have had a better understanding of the instrument to record and score student performances. Goodbye for now.